Good day, everyone. Welcome. Today we're going to work through a pretty practical webinar and practical framework for the time we're in right now in working through mapping your cash from the bottom up. My name is Shannon Susko. I am a serial entrepreneur. I work with companies from around the world, and I work with coaches from around the world, and I feel pretty lucky to have done so for many years and continuing to do so through this time. I'm a Whistler local, Whistler, British Columbia, and a local since April 1990. So this is my 30-year anniversary, and I'm really happy to work with the Whistler Chamber to offer this out to members and other leaders and entrepreneurs out there who are working through a pretty challenging time. So without further ado, let's jump right into this. I always like to start out a webinar with one word and with a picture. And I want you to take a second when you look at this picture and what comes to mind? What's the one word that comes to mind? And for some of you, it might be of a great time, and for others, it might be what comes to mind when I see this picture. And this is probably an absurd picture for a webinar like this, but I was told back in the day when I was building my first company that cash is king. And so in our companies, we had pictures of Elvis all on our walls around the office. I'm sure visitors to our office thought it was ridiculous. But it was just a reminder that at the end of the day, it's what cash is in the bank. The brutal fact of that is what we have to actually grow and move our company forward. And so as much as cash is talked about, and it's said a lot, cash is king, what I want to talk about today is really how do we bring that into focus, not only at a time like this. We're going to learn some really good practices and steps as we work through this time and this economy and what we're living through. But for now and going forward, I want us to always remember what are the steps we need to do to ensure cash is truly king, and how do we make it so that not only as leaders of our organizations we think that way, but as the whole organization thinks that way. So just a quick overview of what we're going to work through today. I'm going to give you, there's just one big objective for today, and I want to leave it as a picture in your mind. So after, this webinar, after this time we spend together, that you think back to this, you think about that one picture. And then we're going to talk about just a quick overview of the growth system. And you're probably thinking, like, why are we even talking about a growth system at a time like this? And I'll give you some context to that. But the biggest thing is no matter if you acknowledge this system exists in your company or not, it's there. And the more we're aware of it, and the more we can see it, and the more we see how cash fits into it, the easier it is for us to create this step-by-step, plan that we need to take and work through it as leaders and with our team. Then we're going to work through the step-by-step, map your cash. That's the whole focus of this. And then what are the next steps we need to take in order to ensure we can, take into practice what we learned today. So the biggest objective of today, and really every day when I work with companies and in building my own companies, we're always looking to build the longest cash runway we can, right? The longest cash runway we can. And if you, as I said, take away one thing, I want you to think about how can we build the longest cash runway? How can you build the longest cash runway you possibly can get your hands on and see and actually really, think about what are the things we can do? We have a reality, we have the brutal facts of today, and then what are the things we can do to add, to extend our runway, to preserve our runway? So with that, let's just step in quickly and have a quick look at the growth system. And I just have two slides in here. And one is of the whole Metronome growth system as we know it. And as we built it up in our organizations, thinking of it as a house. And every organization has a cultural system, and it's the absolute foundation of the house. And it's absolutely, you know, founded upon why the organization exists, what the core values are, the behaviors we accept, and what's our long-term, our 10 to 30 year goal. And that's coined by Jim Collins. We also have our cohesive system, really important in this time, where we're thinking about team trust, we're thinking about healthy team conflict, what we commit to, what we're accountable to as a team, and what the team result is. And then of course, our human system. How do we ensure that we have A players? We attract, keep, and grow A players. And at this time, we want to ensure that our A players are well taken care of for now and the future. And at the very top of the house, it's our leaders and our team. They sandwich it all together. They actually create the frame of the house. And what happens on the inside of the house? There's three things: execution, cash, and strategy. And they all are tightly tied. And why I'm showing you this is because you can see the cash system is at the heart of every company. And a lot of us don't think of our cash system at the heart. We think of it as cash in the bank. And what I want you to walk out of here with is, how do we keep a cash system alive in our organization today, tomorrow, next week, next month, as we roll through this time? This is a journey we're on. It's, you know, felt like a sprint for the last 3 or 4 weeks now that we've been in this. And now that, you know, we get our legs underneath us, we've got to, you know, start looking at where are we right now and how do we get through this time. And with that, you know, we still look at 3 key things at this time, and all the companies I'm working with, including my own, are still following along these 3 things. 1, our core purpose of, you know, our organization hasn't changed, and I don't think any organization I work with, the core purpose has changed, that foundation. And then when we think of the long-term goals, that 10 to 30 year goal, that hasn't really changed either. What has changed is what we have to think about right now is, how do we get 3 years from now? What do we do right now, right? Thinking out into this year of 2020. And then what do we do in the next 90 days? What do we do in the next 30 days? And we need to over communicate these things to our team. You cannot over communicate enough at this time. If you're a leader listening in and you think you have, I can assure you, we have not said the messages that we need to say to our team enough. And we need to do it in many, many mediums. And I know back in the day, I was told by my coach that, you know, until you've said it 7 ways, 7 different times, you know, the message probably hasn't been heard. And I would say at a time like this, we have to actually say it way more than 7 times. And then of course, the last piece there is getting our focus on cash and understanding how we bring it into the dynamic nature of what we're thinking about. Whether our business is shut down right now, we're getting ready to, you know, see what the next step is in our business, or, you know, what our business is running. And in some cases, it might be, you know, beyond planned. We are at a time where we're in a high demand. And we need to repeat these things over and over and around and around. And the thing that we were always looking for in growing up a company, in good times and bad, is a repeatable system that the team comes to expect and that we can build and manage and make it practical as a leader to put in place. So with that, if we take in the context of cash, let's work through a step-by-step. What do we have to think about and build it up from the bottom up? Most companies that I've talked to over the last 4 weeks, you know, really didn't want to go to the bottom. It's human not to want to go to the bottom and go to the brutal facts. But once we do, and we do that ourselves as leaders and with our team, it actually makes it a lot easier to think about and talk about the things we need to do to move the company forward. I grabbed this graphic from McKinsey & Company, and it's something that came out a few weeks ago, thinking about the 5 horizons that each and every organization will work through, think through, and act through. And, you know, the first bit is the resolve stage and addressing the immediate challenges. And then we go to resilience, and that's where cash management and cash, you know, reality is really focused in on. But not only there do we want to keep that going, we want to keep it as we move forward, thinking about what the return is and a return to our business and what it looks like, right, post-lockdown. And then we want to look even further to the reimagination of what's the next normal. A lot of people are calling it the new normal. And then we want to look out even further. And so right now, a lot of organizations are in that, sort of phase one, that first horizon, right? Resolve, lots of move through that. And now we're in resilience, looking further out. And lots, want the return to happen sooner than later, of course. And we need to figure out what that's going to look like and how do we get there. And probably the biggest thing on everyone's mind is, when is that going to happen? And the biggest thing is, we need to ensure that whatever runway we have, that we are as creative as we possibly can to ensure we can bring our organization and our team through that time. And I always say through the time. In the beginning, I was saying, we just have to thread the needle. And when we think of threading the needle, we think that's a really short time. And, as time has gone on through, the crisis we're facing, I keep saying it's through the tunnel, and we want to see to the other side of the tunnel, and we want that runway, to get us through there from a cash basis. So, this is a question I've asked a lot of people, and the question is, what's the difference between a startup early stage CEO, and that's where I grew up from in my, experience a few times now, and a COVID-19 CEO? Right? And you're probably thinking, like, what do you mean? And you know what? I've had a few people go, well, what do you mean by that? And what I mean by that question is, what's the difference? What does a startup early stage CEO have to do differently than a COVID-19 CEO? And it's really, the answer is, there is no difference. There is no difference between the two. And why that is a startup early stage CEO, no matter if they're in this time or any time, they still are founded upon a core purpose. They have long-term goals, near-term goals. They have annual goals, 90-day goals. They have to have consistent communication. They must over-communicate, and they must create a cash runway, as long as they possibly can. They must preserve cash to get through the time where they grow up their business. And a COVID-19 CEO has to do the same thing. Right? We need to stay true to our core purpose. We need to actually understand, is our long-term goal still valid or not? Is our near-term goal valid or not? That's thinking 3 years out from now. Lots of companies I work with have the same 3-year goal, but the difference is they might be how they get there. They're going to take a different path, but they have the same goal. Their annual goal definitely, and I think every company I work with has changed. Some goals are bigger than what they thought because of what they do and what they're supplying at this time. And others are less than what they thought. And they're going to have to be more creative. And then when we get into this 90-day period, lots of companies have just entered, if you're in a calendar fiscal year, Q2, and even people who had their plans ready for Q2 had to scramble to readjust them based on the new reality we're living in. And not only that, we need to set up, and I think every company I work with has a consistent communication cadence right now. Some are having a daily huddle every day. Some are on top of that doing a daily video out to everybody, both team members and their marketplace. And some are closing out their day with another daily huddle. And then that evening, they're sending out an email to sort of follow that up. And again, it's that over communicate that we need to get at. And then the last piece that maybe is new for a lot of CEOs and a lot of leadership teams out there is really understanding their cash runway. And lots of companies have cash. There's lots of companies that don't have much cash and are looking for support. And that's what we want to work through. So with that, how that relates to map your cash is we've got to understand our cash runway. We've got to go to the bottom first and work our way up. And what really got my attention to actually, create this sort of look at what we did as a startup early stage CEO through good times and bad, And in talking with companies, some of my largest companies were just, really removing and downplaying their top line revenue and not really adjusting what's going to happen to their cash and thinking about that in real time with their leadership team. So that led me in many discussions over 4 weeks ago to start working through with the companies that I work with to go to the very bottom and understand how much cash is in the bank. And then from there, the next step we took is what are the other sources available? What are the ones that are, absolutely we've got them in the bag, and what are ones that we can apply for, and what are other sort of sources of cash we can look at that we have in place or we may need to put in place. From there, depending on your business, you might have sales already booked and a backlog, and we need to understand the probability of that backlog and how do we prioritize that backlog now with the probability of receiving cash, and is that backlog truly going to come through this time. And we're dealing with lots of different businesses, and some businesses, if you're direct to consumer, you might not have a backlog. It depends how you sell and how you have sold and what the new ways are you're selling. And others, they have a huge backlog, and we have to understand the probability of that. Then we have to go to the sales pipeline. And again, if you're a business consumer, your pipeline might have dried up if you are a face-to-face business and you are no longer able to operate that way. And that's something we need to talk about. And then if you are a business that can continue on and work virtually and deliver virtually, then we have to understand our pipeline and the probabilities that were originally in that pipeline, and what are the probabilities of, if we actually close those deals, the ability for those customers to pay. We then have to work through the scenarios that exist. And what I mean by that is thinking about the brutal facts of our current market environment, depending on what industry you're in. We have to understand the timing of how long this might last, depending on the industry, the segment, the country you might be in. As well, we need to understand, and this is something we'd always do, the best, worst, most likely scenarios. And we need to paint that picture. And then from there, once we do that, we think of cash in this scenario as days of cash. And I've had a lot of people react to that going, days of cash? I never react to days of cash. Well, it's a good time to actually map our cash out by the amount of days and cost our business out that way, because it creates great urgency. And we want to be able to focus in so we can make better, faster decisions based on our cash position and things that happen in step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We need to be able to work that as a leadership team. And some of the companies that might be listening in could be a small company. The leadership team could be a few people or right down to one person, but we still need that visibility. Or it might be a really large organization. And you know what, as CEO and the leaders of that business, we still need to be able to dynamically look at our cash position, at least if we can get it to every day. At the very minimum from there, every week, we need to manage cash in and out. And then we're going to go out from there and look at it on a monthly basis from there. And in order to do that, we need some tools. Now, I asked a lot of companies out there, big and small, what is the key tool they're using to sort of remap their plan, remap their cash in this type of scenario that we're going to work through. And the number one tool, and we'll talk about it a bit more, is a spreadsheet. Whether it's Google Sheets, Excel, whatever it is a spreadsheet, so we can create the what-if scenarios we need. There are some other tools out there that I've seen that I do have companies using, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's the step by step, and there's a lot in there. I could talk for hours on this, and I feel like I have been over the last 4 weeks, but I want to give you a view of this so that, I know for me as a CEO, what I wanted to check in on, did I get everything? Did our team, our leaders, did we think of everything possible? Did we miss anything? That's the other thing I want to make sure that it's a bit of a checklist we're going to work through. So if we go to the bottom and we think of step one as, map your cash, we've really got to put the brutal facts on the table. And I just grabbed this quote from Andy Grove, which, if the brutal facts are not faced by leaders, the brutal reality sets in. And we don't want that to happen. We want to just put it out there, good, bad, or ugly, and then figure it out from there. And, every day when we think of, even just growing a business, we need to have the courage always to put the brutal facts on the table. So when we're mapping cash, this is no different. We want to go to the very bottom. And what we want to do is we want to look at your bank balance today, take your bank balance today, divide by the cost per day it takes to run your business. And most of us don't, automatically have that number. We usually have a cost per month it takes us to run our business, and we have fixed costs and variable costs. But let's just take, what is the cost per day right now? And let's divide it into the cash in the bank, and we're going to come out with our days of cash. Now, I've done this a lot with leaders, and I've heard, a scenario of negative 65 days of cash as of right now. Well, that creates a lot of urgency and creates a lot of creativity to how we're going to manage that going forward. And we'll talk about that in the next step. And I've also heard, some triple digit days of cash, which gives that organization a bit more runway, but it didn't mean that they didn't just walk away at this point and say, we're good. They took each and every step that we're going to work through here. So that's step one. It's simple. Brutal fact of how much cash is in the bank today divided by the cost of your business today equals the days of cash. And we want to, that's your current factual cash runway today. And what we want to do is figure out how do we build it up from there. If we go to step two and we go to other sources, right? What are the other sources of cash available? We want to actually look at it at all the different sources. So you might have a line of credit and you might never have ever wanted to use it, but it was always there as a backstop. Or you might have a line of credit that's already full. Okay, it's not going to increase your days of cash, but that line of credit will give you another little bit of days of cash to add up, divided by the cost per day, right, as we go forward. There are government grants available, and there are ones that are always available, whether they're, IRAP grants, whether they're, HRDC grants, and there's also grants, of course, available for the time this current crisis we're in. And we also know there are loan programs and there's subsidy programs that have been brought forward by the Canadian government. We also see this in the US. We're seeing this in Australia. I don't think there's a country out there that hasn't brought in a program, an emergency response program, whether there's subsidies, loans, but they're trying to take care of all the people right now who are not working and taking care of the businesses and the whole value chain. So if you don't have someone on your team that you have named as the expert to understand these programs, and if you qualify for these programs, there's no time like today. And what we want to do as this time goes on, as we go through this period, we need one person on the team to be that expert, that every time there's a new program put forward or new rules or new requirements, we need to know about them up front so that we can keep focus on our days of cash. We also know that there could be other loans available, and maybe you already had those in place as well. The thing that I think is important about this particular line of other sources is it's what is a sure thing. What's the sure thing that we know right now? That's what we want to add to our days of cash. And as the government loans come forward, as the grants come forward, as the programs come forward, and you get approved and they're in place, you can count those in your days of cash. That's what we want to do, and we want to be experts at this. I never thought I wanted to say that, but we need to be experts at understanding the programs available for our organization to ensure we can actually extend our runway of cash. From there, we want to go to the bookings and backlog. And I know this might not apply to everyone, but I can't ignore the fact that there were lots of companies out there as they rolled into March, might have had $1 million in backlog of orders, or they had hotel bookings, for the next, 6 months to a year. There were things that were happening that we had booked revenue. And so we've got to look at those booked deals and understand what are real right now, what have gone away. And not only that, what is the actual probability and prioritization of that backlog of who can pay in your value chain, and prioritizing those. And those are already, signed deals. And if we can deliver on them, we have the supply chain to deliver, we have, what we need to deliver on them. How can we deliver on them to create the cash, create and increase our days of cash by ensuring we're delivering to customers who can pay at this time? That's not to say we're not going to deliver to the others, but right now we need to actually look at how do we preserve our cash runway and prioritize those ones that can pay. And we'll come back to this around what we need to prioritize. I'm just giving you a high level view of making sure that you're checking the boxes as we work through this. When we think of step 4 of the pipeline, most businesses, not all, would have had a pipeline, a sales pipeline they were working. And there was different levels of probability in that pipeline, whether they were going to close that business or not. And now when we think about it, what we work through with a lot of companies and what we even worked through in our businesses as we went through downturns over the years is we then prioritized our pipeline now. Again, if we were prioritizing them of who can still afford to buy from us, how badly, do they need it and can they pay for it? Again, it sounds weird, can they pay for it? But we want to be able to actually book that revenue and deliver it and get paid for it. So we're looking at our pipeline from that perspective, which is a very different way of looking at our pipeline in the past, where we would just move our deals through the probabilities of, how we would do, step 1 in our sales process, step 2, step 3. Now we're looking at it and looking at the business we're selling to. We're also got to think about all our customers out there. This goes without saying, but I'm going to say it. You've probably heard it, enough at this point, but we have to reach out to every one of our customers in the booked backlog area and every one in our pipeline and understand what we can do to help them right now. And with that, we'll hear a lot of things because our core customers' needs could have shifted at this time, and we need to understand that as well. So it's a great thing to do to reach out to your backlog, to reach out to your pipeline, but we're also doing it to understand who needs what we have, prioritizing it in regards to how do we extend our cash runway. If we think of step 5, which is the scenarios, which we'll go into a lot more detail in the webinar next week when we sort of map out the whole thing. But I do have a couple steps in here that I want to give you a view of this, because once we're doing all this, we're extending our runway, you're probably thinking there's a lot of different things that could play out here. And we have to figure out what is, the time-based assumptions we need to apply, best, worst, most likely. And we have to figure out, what does this look like going forward? What's our best case scenario? What's our worst case? What's our most likely case? And so in working with teams who have gotten through sort of stepping through understanding their cash runway, because that was sort of an immediate here and now, the next step of this, and it's important that we think about it this way, is we've got to think about as a team, and I always recommend do this as CEO first, leader, owner, and just, answer these questions for yourself. What month, it depends what country, what province, where you are, what month, does lockdown likely end, right? That's one thing we have to think about. Never thought I'd be asking that question, but that's a question we need to answer. What month will the new normal kick in, right? So, and everybody, I've been asking these questions for 4 weeks from around the world. There are many, many different answers. Very optimistic ones, very, the worst case scenario. And then a lot of people are ending up sort of in the middle. And as time goes, people are getting more comfortable with what's happening. And then, the biggest question out there that everyone's trying to model and look at is, then what will happen with the economy and when will it recover? And just level setting that on your own as a leader of a business. You've sort of got to come to grips with that and that reality of what you think and looking out and what other people think and ask your peers. And then we also have to get that feedback from our team. It helps us understand when we're going to plan why they're thinking certain ways and why they're suggesting certain things. From there, we want to sort of get in front of us. A tool I've been using a lot is a tool called Mural.co. It's it's actually like a whiteboard in the cloud that goes on forever and allows us to collaborate and brainstorm. And we've been doing this with every team I work with and more. What are the key facts that we must address in the marketplace we're playing in and the things that are happening in the world, what's just going on around us, looking out, what are the trends now that we've been talking to our customers and talking to people, can we actually get up there and get in there with Post-it notes and let's create a picture. Again, so we together get our heads around this. And then when we think out beyond that, then the next step, and we'll go in deeper into this next week, and this is part of the questions we need to step through. And there's a few more, but I want to give you thinking about this around the scenario planning, because we then need to think about this in the most likely, the best, and the worst case. And how we've approached it and how I've been approaching it for 20 years and building up startup, early stage, and then getting into a high growth business is we always want to talk about most likely to best, right? We're human, of course we do. And so we want to paint the picture of what does most likely look like, right? We want to paint the picture, just what are the things we see in a most likely scenario. And we've been doing this 1 year out, right? Let's go to the end of our fiscal year, whatever that is, right? And if we're at the end of our fiscal year, if we ended in April 30th, we'd go a year out from now. And as a team, we're talking about this. And then we're going to put up, what we think, our gross rev might be. And what do we think, what are we going to sell? And what do we think the number of people on our team might be? And of course, how much cash is in the bank? And we're going to sort of build that up just for a view, nothing fancy. And the big thing is what teams are loving about this is the opportunity to talk this out. We're human. The best thing we can do to reduce anxiety around this time is to talk it out and to brainstorm it together to get the ideas onto the table. Then from there, we want to say, if we could make that true, what would be true in the best case scenario? And we're only adding in the things that would be additional to the most likely. So maybe we saw a little opportunity there and we talked about it and we said, well, in the best case, that would be true. Or maybe a few things that we wrote down in the most likely, we need to move up to the best case area because that's a little too aspirational to what we see. And then the last step we're going to take, and I always have a bit of a smile on my face when we go to the worst case, because when we do that with a team, when we say, what's the worst case? Again, we're getting to like the minimum here. What's the minimum that's going to happen? And why I always have a bit of a smirk or a smile on my face when I work with a team through this is because it gets really down to the key things we need to do in our business. It gets down to what we do as a business. And it usually gets down to how we make money. And those are the things that pop up there. And then when I look from the worst case to most likely case, usually half of what we wrote in the most likely or more is what is covered off in the worst case scenario. And so when we're trying to come together as a team and we're trying to map our cash runway out, we're trying to figure out what we look like going forward, we can get really clear on what are the 1 to 3 things that we must do through this time, from here to the end of the year, from here in the next 90 days. And if we look out 30 days, we get really clear what we need to do. And that's part of what we're going to work through next time is we're going to, paint the picture. And then we have to go from here. How do we turn that into an actionable plan and answer the key questions so our team can get aligned to this, lined up to it, aligning it, of course, to our cash runway and being real about what we can and can't do and being brutally honest with ourselves and get really creative on what are the things we can do. And I've seen such creative teams and companies come up with a plan that they're now executing to move through this time and to extend and preserve their cash runway. That's a ton of information. Believe me, I know it. I actually questioned whether I should put all that in there, but I really want to set it up that that's what we're going to spend time on next time, thinking about not only mapping our cash out, but we've got to map out the other areas of our business. And we have to think about, people, right? That's what's the number one thing, strategy and our execution plan to move through this time. Then as we think about this whole thing, whether it's our cash runway aligned to our plan, we've got to keep it alive every day. And partly how we keep it alive every day is creating the ability for us to agree on the plan, look at our cash plus our priorities. And why I say repeat every day is we've got to create an environment that we can look at it every day, that we actually have a consistent communication rhythm, that the leadership team is talking every day, and that we are focused in on only the things that matter. And that's what that scenario planning helps us get through, gets rid of the noise so we can focus in and make good decisions day in and day out on, of course, the things we need to do to preserve our cash runway. And the last step here when we think about this is our tools. What are the tools? So I mentioned a few of them, right? We have to, a spreadsheet is a great tool, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. There are cash flow apps out there that can be leveraged. I know companies who were using them before we rolled into this time, and they're still using them, and they have a good cadence around them. And the last one I have on there is a tool that we've gotten incredible feedback on. I use this tool every day as a coach. I use it with my clients, and with all full disclosure, it's a tool that I had the pleasure of designing with Ben Bourget and Paul Rempel and the team in order to ensure that we could grow businesses up through the growth system. But it's being used heavily right now because it's a software platform in a virtual world that you can put the key metrics you need to monitor in place and look at them every day. And so we marry this up with a tool like that. There's other tools out there. I know people are using project management tools like Asana. They just got to use a virtual tool so that now that we're having virtual meetings, we can see them. And Excel spreadsheets, we can see, alive. We can actually use them, pop them into our virtual meetings as well. And what I want to talk about that spreadsheet is that every company I know out there has, either they call it a budget, and I say that, with a very static nature of a budget, and it's a very accounting view of a budget, and or they have a forecast. And there's no difference, right? We have a plan for the year. We had a cash plan of what our fiscal metrics were going to be at the end of this year, at the end of this quarter, at the end of this month. And the key that I want people to walk away with is, what I'm talking about in this map your cash, keep it alive, get your team working on the whole plan, whether you're a team of 2 or a team of 1,000, is we've got to create this cash view, this cash forecast in a profit and loss statement that is cash-based, not accounting-based. This is a leadership team tool, not a finance team tool. And with all due respect to the finance team, they've got a model created, and it's got all the rules in it that around, all the finance rules, revenue recognition, like all the things that, appreciation, depreciation, all those things. But really, frankly, right now, today and going forward, we want to drive our company looking at cash. And it's lumpy when we look at cash in and cash out. And a lot of people, after I've worked through this with teams, I go, what does that look like? And it truly looks like a profit loss statement that your company already has, with all, it's basically cleared out, with all the, rules cleared out, and we're actually plopping cash in when we receive cash in the bank, when we spend cash in the bank. And on the left-hand column is your profit loss statement, line by line. And at the very bottom, which is very different than what most would have, we always had this. Well, I wouldn't say always. It took me about a year to figure out, as a CEO growing up a business, I should just put the cash balance at the bottom of my profit loss and make it a cash-based profit loss statement. So when you build up that spreadsheet, you probably already have one. That's the thing. You want to clean it out, and we want to get a cash view of this. And at the very bottom, you want to put your beginning cash balance, your ending cash balance, whether you're doing it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, right? And we want to know cash in and cash out. And it's going to come from your expense lines in your profit loss statement. And we're going to prioritize that cash out for sure. And then from there, we want to put at the very top of it, we've booked revenue. That doesn't mean it's cash in the bank. That means there's a period of time where it takes for us to actually, we have to spend some money to deliver, implement, whatever it is we do, right? There's a cost there, and it takes a certain amount of time. And then once we deliver it, we're gonna, send an invoice, charge a credit card, whatever it is, and we're gonna take cash in. We need to create this from a cash perspective. This creates a great visibility into the timing of our cash as we look forward. And again, I hesitated whether I should put this in or not, but I had a lot of questions over time as we've talked about this. What does the spreadsheet look like? And it looks no different than your profit loss statement as you look at it today out of your financials. But what we want to do is get it into Excel, get it into Google Sheets, whatever you're using, clear out the accrual bases in it, and make it into cash. And you're thinking like, I'm not an accountant. I don't do I don't know this stuff. Literally, it's all about cash in and cash out. And I can tell you, my own finance team back in the day, we had it out over this. And this is a leadership team tool to make good decisions about your cash. And at the end of the day, we get to, the one thing we control is when cash goes out. And we need to control that based on what we need to do to preserve our runway and prioritize the things we need to pay. So we need to map it out line by line on a cash basis. So there's a good question that popped in here about AR and AP, and I'm going to fit that right into this. And I think it's really important, AR and AP, because that's where being accounts receivable and accounts payable, because prioritizing those are probably you've probably already done that inherently. And then, we have to do the top ones, and we have to work through it. So the next slide is all about, thinking about what do we prioritize and when to extend our cash runway, right? So if we have cash in the bank, we get to decide and prioritize who we pay, and not to be, hard on that, but we need to prioritize who are the most important payments we must make. And I've heard a lot of different things on this. And the number one, prioritized payment that I've seen and I've heard over and over again are our people, of course. Payroll seems to be the biggest payment we have. And it's the number one thing we want to do is we want to keep our team going forward. We need to pay them. And so we're trying to figure out how we do that. And that becomes prioritized. And when we think of a early stage company, a startup company, COVID-19 company, paying our people usually is number one. So we're prioritizing that. And then I've seen lots of different things become prioritized as number two. And depends what your business is on what gets prioritized. But what I would suggest around prioritizing your accounts payable is sitting down with your team. And this is one of the best times, go line by line, go through every last line item you have as a payable and prioritize them, the must pays. And then we have to figure out the timing of those. That's where that scenario planning comes in. And then the next group of, should pay. And then the ones that I just don't think we can pay. And the thing I recommend, and what we've done over the years of building up companies and getting into these situations as we're in growth mode or we're in a downturn market, is being front and center with anyone that we're supposed to pay, getting on the phone with who we're supposed to pay, and being upfront and transparent about what we can and can't do. It's amazing what your vendors will do to support you and how creative can we be to get through the time. They're of course doing the same thing as well. Every company in your value chain is working through this process. So you got to get that. When I say line by line in a P&L, that's usually line by line, every expense you have, prioritize it. Definitely do that. The second part is prioritize the sources. So I've had lots of people going, Shannon, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of sources that are available. And that's why we need to understand what sources are available, what ones we qualify for, and where and who should spend time looking to actually get those dollars so we can add it to our runway. Okay, so that's prioritizing that time. And you know, when we're a small business, and there's so many small businesses out there struggling to find time, right, to do this. Some are, you know, still delivering on their service or their goods and trying to do this. And others actually are, you know, not open right now, but they need to do this as well and find time to do this as they're, you know, in, you know, what I call, you know, crisis planning mode in trying to figure out, you know, making the best decisions at the moment as we step through this. Then we go to AR, our AR. And one of the things is some teams have, you know, kept this down to X amount of days and we're on top of their accounts receivable, but do the exact same thing. And I mentioned it earlier, prioritize your accounts receivable and work through that plan top to bottom, bottom to top. It's really important that you prioritize. Again, timing's everything here. We're trying to extend our cash runway, work through this. And if you have a good practice with your AR, you know, days that are short, then we're just keeping that alive. It's also a great opportunity just to reach out to all your accounts and figure out what situation they're in and understanding what, you know, you can do to help and how that fits into your overall plan of extending your runway as well. Then we go to the pipeline, right? Thinking about who's in our pipeline, how do we prioritize to serve them, right? What do we do to serve them and who can we serve and can they pay? I mean, that sounds ridiculous because we usually sell and they can pay, but some of your customers still might need what you have and can't pay right now. And can we do something to support them as well? And can we afford to do that? That's the other piece to this. Then when we look at scenarios, we've got to think about, you know, that scenario planning. And most people don't think this way, but we need to plan for the worst. And then we need to work to the best. And by building up those sort of painted pictures, and then those painted pictures are going to come into your plan, your step-by-step plan that we'll work through next time. This is what we need. Plan for the worst. We know the minimum we need to do to get through this. And then we're going to layer on the steps we need to take towards most likely. And then from there, we're going to actually, you know, we're human. Of course, we're going to go for the best, but we need to put the brutal facts on the table and level set them every day, every week to what's going on around us. And then, of course, we've got to prioritize mapping our cash. This is not a one and done thing. And I really hope coming out of this, you never stop. Prioritize mapping your cash and making that cash runway, you know, sort of the focus, and make cash king as we roll forward. And then the last thing is, although this sounds like you're going, holy cow, there's a lot of steps. I'm already overwhelmed and now I need to do all these things. The key to this is, and why we want to just ask ourselves some questions and ask ourselves some team, and we got to get our minds and heads around this, starting with the brutal facts and working forward, is the key to this is keeping it simple enough that we can keep it alive so we can look at it every day, and so that we can actually make better, faster decisions each and every day when things get thrown at us. Because as you know, and everyone's been living through this, each day has been something new and we've had to deal with it. And the more we have visibility on this bottom-up view, the easier it is and the faster we can actually take action and feel comfortable and confident that we are making the best actions for what we have available in the information at this time. So with this, we're looking all along the way to extend our cash runway. And if you walk out of this, that's really what we've got to think about. How long's your runway? I want everyone to know that. And if we're in days, if we're in weeks, if we're in months, we need to know it. If you got a lot or a little, we need to know it. And then from there, we want to look at the buildup, right? So CEO first, leader, owner first. Let's do that. Map your cash. Prioritize payables, liabilities, receivables, get a handle on that, and line it up to how you do business, right? We have a way to make money. We did before. How do we do it going forward? We need to align it to our goals. We're going to answer those questions. Are they still true? Have they evolved? What's another way we're going to actually have to take to get there? And then we need that transparent sort of scoreboard. I know that might sound ridiculous, but that's key. The more honest we are with ourselves, our leaders, and our team, the more everybody will band together and get empowered to work through this with us. This is the time where we can actually, include our team, get the ideas, but we've got to get them focused on how do we get through this time and get rid of the noise. So with that, this is an ongoing thing that we'll take from now into the future. And we're going to do that. The more we do it, the more we get comfortable with it. I always say in the beginning, we've got to actually get this to a cash-based view. Very simple, right? Prioritize the things we can pay. So cash going out. Widget forecast means what are the things we're going to deliver? So cash coming in. Focus only on what matters. And then be transparent about where we are each and every day. And that's what gets the team engaged and empowered to work through this. From there, if we think of next steps, I always say, when I'm working with CEOs to get, CEOs, get your head around this first, right? Then bring the team in and do it like from a blank slate, do it again. And you're going, who's got time for that? You got to make time for this. This is how we'll get a whole team aligned. We need a whole team to actually be creative to get through here. So we get to the scenarios that we can actually get a hold of and that we can actually see where we're spending cash every day and where we're taking cash in every day. And I always say the war room, right? So when we build up a company, we have a war room, we have pictures in our war room, we have our plans in our war room, and we need a cash view in our war room. And we need to ensure that how we function today as a company, that we actually continue to function that way, or we need to evolve. And I don't think I've said that enough. We need to evolve. If we're doing, our business is shut down, we have to do business in a virtual way. We have to do it a different way. We have to get creative on what are the key functions in our business and how do they work together and how are we going to make money now going forward. The last thing I would say that people are starting to do now is people's heads are up a bit more and looking around and looking at the marketplace. And we need to look out right into the market. We need to look around. We have to look at our goals. And then we want to look down at what's right here, right now. That's our cash runway. That's the plan we need to do today, tomorrow, next week, and keep on moving from there. And so we have to look up and we have to look down. We have to look up and look down. And someone said, what does that mean? Looking up is looking out into where we're going, like we're driving the car. And then we have to look down at sort of our dashboard and go, yep, we're still good. Look up and look out to where we're going. And from there to bring this back around to where we started, we have systems in our business. They're running, no matter we acknowledge these or not, they are moving forward, and we are the ones that keep driving them forward. And it's starting with cash as the core, thinking about execution, right? We now got to keep it going. What are the only things we need to do right now to move forward? We then looking out and around is all about strategy. And the whole idea behind the house is taking care of our team. Taking care of our team and leveraging our team through this time. Yeah, it's amazing what humans will do as a team through a time like this. I've seen some amazing stories. And for us as leaders, we need to keep our purpose and goals in front of us. We need to over communicate, and we have to tie cash into what we do every day. And so the whole idea behind this is to build the longest cash runway you can and keep looking back at it. One of the anti-stress sort of techniques I had as a, CEO building up a company in good times and bad is I always go exercise to get rid of that stress. But the other thing I did is I always looked at my cash runway to go, yep, I'm still good. Yep, I can see it. I'm still good. As the leader of the business, I can still see it, and I'm still focused in on what I need to do to extend the cash runway. So be safe out there. Take care of your team. Be cautious, meaning get focused on what you need to do. And it is a new world out there. It's amazing what the business world has done and teams have done to adapt. Myself, my team, Metronome United, we're a group of experienced CEOs and coaches from around the world. There's 70 of us who have been doing webinars and spending one-on-one time with CEOs and leaders every day. And we've been offering complimentary virtual live roundtables every day. CEOs from every time zone, countries around the world. We've been doing this. Just anyone who needs help. And if you do need help and you need to talk through something one-on-one, please go, just head to Metronome United. I put this big, I actually did it in about 4 weeks ago, a big ugly button on the homepage. It says complimentary virtual CEO roundtable. Click it. It'll show you all the times available. Pick one that suits you if you need help. We are here to help, and we're really focused on working with companies to get through this time. And that's the key. And it's been amazing to see how people have come together to get through this time as a group, as a community. And we need community to actually move, our businesses forward. We need community to move our communities forward. And as just human beings, we need that in this virtual world we're living in. Some other things, there's a 3HAG webinar series we offered year one. There's a code right on our home website that you can just get the whole year free. I don't even, that's usually a paid for. We just want people to have the ability to step through what they need when they need it. And that's really what we're about at this time. So from there, the questions, I've answered the questions. I see a chat window popped up. I'm just going to go there for a second to see if there's anything, feedback. I appreciate the feedback that's in there. This whole webinar, to close this out, it was built, and the things we've been doing to work with leaders is to make sure that you haven't missed anything. That's the worst feeling. For me as a CEO too, I don't want to miss anything. So the roundtables are set up, and webinars like this are set up for that step-by-step checklist. So these are the ones, hopefully you took away a good, actionable step-by-step that you can follow through on, and that you're thinking about, from now and hopefully forever, the habit will remain about your cash runway and preserving it and looking at it every day. Thanks so much for the opportunity to work with Whistler Chamber and the community. And hopefully I'll see you next week when we work through a more detailed, step-by-step. Now that I've got a view of my cash runway, what are the next steps we take? Okay, so from there, I'm going to close it off. Thanks again. And hopefully we'll see you next week.